many, this heat, dust, and isolation remain the perception of agriculture. However, in the 21st century, agriculture is an exciting, high-tech sector that feeds the world.
Hi there.
Hello,
Welcome, Stephan. Today we're chatting to Stephan Pietersen from the Work Accident Support. It's a company that he has. Is it a company? Am I correct, Stephan?
That is correct, yeah.
Okay. And that is to support people with accident fund related issues. So compensation for occupational injuries and diseases act within agriculture. That is the field that you work in. So welcome, and tell us a little bit more about your business.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. Yeah, as you mentioned, you know what, unfortunately or fortunately for some, there's a lot of labor legislation in South Africa, and people have to be aware of that. And specifically in the agricultural industry, there is so much more that they have to deal with compared to any other category of companies out there. So what we do is we assist specifically farmers, but anyone who approaches us to deal with any matter with regarding to the Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases Act. That is your work accidents. If they've got issues with the accounts payable at the compensation fund or any issue emanating from that legislation, we assist them, we provide them with training, we consult them. So any matter we speak to them about. And then there's a lot of other things that we do in terms of media work, writing articles just to try and get the information out there so that they can be well prepared when something happens on a farm.
Okay.
So you obviously have found your business has been established to answer a need within the sector. So obviously there must be quite a need. So tell us a little bit about the challenges. Why do people? I mean, obviously you are fulfilling a need, but
I think before we get there is that what's your background? How did you get to this?
Yes, tell us.
Okay, Anna, great. Actually, I used to work for the Department of Labour's Compensation Fund for about 10, 11 years. So I gained quite a experience in terms of the daily processes, procedures of how these matters must be resolved, the kind of documents which must be provided to resolve these matters. From there, I went to a university here in South Africa, still dealing with work-related accidents, but also a bit of background in employee benefits. So dealing with all of those kind of matters as well. And then I started to receive quite a number of referrals from companies who actually started to have problems in their daily administration of this labor legislation. And I realized, you know what, there's quite a need for someone to assist these companies in terms of their administration or just consult them. But then, so I started this business in 2019. But then I started to focus specifically on the agricultural industry because I felt, you know what, there is a need because farmers are so widespread. I mean, they're so far from major centers within South Africa. I mean, some farmers have to drive 150, 200 kilometers to get to the nearest town. And for them to drive there just to deal with this paperwork, I mean, it is quite a challenge. And unfortunately, also dealing with government can be challenging, and even their own leadership at the fund actually acknowledge but some of the challenges companies or people outside are facing in dealing with them. But in terms of my background, as I mentioned, I've got more than 20, 25 years experience in dealing with this act. And I think the most important part probably is the fact that I used to work for the fund, so I can see the inside how things need to be dealt with, and so that you can advise anyone who's approaching you what is the right way to resolve a problem in the quickest time.
So on that note, with you saying that a lot of logistics might be a problem with some of the growers or the
Mm.
farmers wherever they are. You work with all types of farmers, or just
Yeah.
specific type of agriculture?
No, basically everyone in the sector, so it does not really matter, and right across South Africa as well. But I do have a focus on many of the inland provinces, but also the Western Cape as well. And so the business itself is also associated and affiliated with some provincial uh, farmers unions. So we membership and we official service providers of some of these agricultural unions within a couple of
Like
provinces.
like Agri West-Kaap, Agri Noord-Kaap, all those things. We've seen you travel all over to the young farmer shows and
Yeah,
everything.
yeah, no, that's correct. And what we also do is also to sponsor the young farm in a couple of provinces with our services, with our consultation for a year from the date they were they won the prize as the young farmer in their province, just to make sure that we can be at the right places. I mean, where the need is. But as I say, we do this work in all provinces, and most of the work can be done electronically, so you don't really have to go to a labor center. But what we also do is, whenever something, I'm say for instance, I'm attending an event in the Western Cape, and I normally drive there. Then on my way, I will go and visit some of the farmers that we've assisted previously, just to catch up. But most of the stuff can be done online to assist them in any kind of matter.
Okay. And
Okay.
where are you based?
I'm in Pretoria, so the business is established here. And I think this is also the best place to be, because the head office of the Department of Labour, the Compensation Fund, is in Pretoria. So it is quick to get to the office. And then also not in terms of going there in finalizing certain queries, but also just the information that they share. That is where we will come from. So I'll be one of the first people that will know if there's information coming from them, maybe certain work procedures that's going to change, and maybe there's new regulations, new legislation. So this is the right place to be updated with all of that kind of information.
Stephen, I'm very impressed by what you were saying about that you actually worked for the department and you were in there and you were working in that environment for many, many years. So you have the inside knowledge of
Mm,
how the procedures work and all the rest. And you saw the need for this because in my past, I was also part of a farming business. And I know that the work accident fund it's always a schlep to try and get anything processed. So obviously you saw the challenge and
Mostly in government, it's a schlep to get something
mm,
processed.
but it's absolutely, and it's wonderful that you've seen the gap and you've seen that there's an opportunity for you to assist people, and that you're doing this, and like how your business has been running from 2019. Obviously, COVID must have been it was a hiccup for all of us. But how's it going?
No, it actually is going quite well. I mean, if I just look at this week, well, I've done quite a lot of media work this week, but apart from that, on Tuesday, between Monday and Tuesday, I, for instance, received six phone calls from farmers. Between them, they had work accidents of about 12, 13, where they needed assistance with. I mean, and that was only in the space of a couple of days. But I normally receive quite a number of calls where they got accidents. And I have to tell you, unfortunately, accidents on farms can be quite serious. I mean, just because of the type of work that they do there. So I do receive quite a number of calls from farmers who's needing assistance, mostly from with regards to work accidents.
So tell me quickly, what's the process? Okay, so I am a farmer in Fontaine, for instance, and I've seen you online. Uh, so I phoned you. I said, Stephen, how are you? I need some help on my thing. So do you have then like a set price that you charge people? How does you don't have to mention the price? Maybe it's different from grower
Mm,
to grower. And then also, let's say an accident did happen on the farm. What is the steps? Do you help and literally fill out all the forms? Do you say, okay, right, Devil, you need to make sure that this, and this, and that. Is there? I'm asking this because I really do not know how it works. So please help
Okay,
us.
yeah, no, I mean, that's understandable. I mean, and many farmers sometimes don't know what the processes are. As I mentioned, sometimes things tend to change and then people are not updated about it. So the first thing that, say for instance, he's a new farmer, he's going to appoint some farm workers now, and he needs assistance with regards to the registration of his farm at the compensation fund to ensure that those workers will be covered against work accidents. So then it depends on the kind of entity that farm is, because he can operate as a sole trader, he can operate as a private company or partnership. Then depending on the kind of entity it is, then certain documents should be provided. So I will assist him. I will provide him with the latest application form, also assisting in completing it, because it's relatively straightforward, but certain things that you have to have good knowledge, specifically if you look at the type of farming. Remember, we've got different type of farming operations in South Africa, like your livestock farming, maybe someone who's planting crops. So they are all differently assessed by the fund. So you have to know that kind of things. But then sometimes also, what if the farm they do mixed farming, and then that is a different way also in looking at, because depending on the kind of subclass that they refer to, so those will be assessed differently. So we go through all of those documents, and then we register that farming business online with the fund. There's a unique number that's been issued to the farm. We send it through to them, and that number must be kept, because that is the number which is going to be used whenever you want to communicate with the compensation fund. So that's the first aspect in registering. So there's a lot of things which you also now have to look at, like the earnings, the wages that the guy is going to pay out to his workers. So that is also going to have a huge impact in how much he is going to pay the compensation fund. And annually, we will advise them about the due date that they have to submit the wages that they're paying out. And based on all of that information, now an account will be issued by the fund. So that is the first step where you have to start in registering the fund, in registering the farming business with the compensation fund. And then it's a process annually where they have to declare the same basically as with SARS. Declare all your income and expenses with SARS, but in this case, it's basically only the salaries that you pay to your workers, and then annually an account will be issued by the compensation fund. But what if there's an accident? I mean, and that's probably the most serious kinds of events that can happen on farms. And believe me, I've dealt with very serious matter, even where someone lost their life as well on a farm. But I mean, that is unfortunately because of the kind of work that they do, that it can happen sometimes, and not necessarily the negligence of the farmer or the farm worker. But with regards to an accident, the first thing they have to do is to complete a prescribed form stating exactly this is how the accident happened, details of the injured person, and get that person as soon as possible to a doctor for medical treatment. But now that is also where it can become a bit of a challenge, because as we know, with the government, with regards to their payment, sometimes it seems a bit slack. Then doctors will treat the guy, but then they would expect maybe the farmer to pay for those medical expenses, for those consultations, which is not actually supposed to happen like that. But
Yes.
that is the reality, and unfortunately it happens. Yeah.
But who then pays back the farmer? If
Yeah,
you
so
put it through the system, do they then pay the doctor, and then the doctor's got to pay you back? Because we all know doctors don't like paying money for things they don't need to.
Yeah, so what should happen in theory is that the doctors should treat the injured person and then claim the money directly from the fund, because the fund also operates as a medical aid. But if the farmer actually pays for the medical expenses, then the farmer just need to provide certain documentation and claim that money back from the compensation fund. So that is what happens, and then that cases must be registered with the fund within 7 days after the farmer received notification of that accident, not necessarily 7 days from when it happened, because if the guy only knew or was only informed about it a couple of days, then it's normally 7 days from that day. And with regards to our fees, sometimes the guy just maybe need something to be done now. Then we would charge him a fee for that service. But what we try to do is to establish a long-term relationship with any farmer that wants to make use of our service, because there's a lot of value which I believe we can add with regards to regulation changes. We will advise them about any of that. When there's due dates that we're talking about, we will advise them about those due dates. What happens is if you don't fulfill that due date, then there might be penalties issued. So that is one thing which we want to prevent. And then sometimes we charge maybe an annual fee, and then whatever happens, say if he sustained a number of accidents, then we will register those accidents depending on what kind of agreement we agree to, and then we don't issue any additional invoices throughout the year. So we just provided with all the necessary information about specific claims, and we process those.
Okay. Well, look, it's listening to a lot of these things I really didn't know. But here's another question. Sorry, Louise, I don't know if you've got anything to ask. But
Go for it.
I'm full of questions. So, do you guys also come to the farms and give training to the workers as to how the system works? Because, and why I'm asking this is, we work on a lot of farms, and you walk in a pack house or a orchard, and you overhear conversations. So I've also heard on these farms where a worker got hurt, and then they would say, yes, but the farmer must still pay me out X amount of money for this thing that was registered with the compensation. And then I think, but I can't see that being the case.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, no, exactly. And I mean, you hear that, and there's this misconception about what's payable, what's not payable. So how it works is the farmer is registered with the fund. He has to pay the worker up to 3 months while being booked off duty, his normal salary, and then that money must be refunded to the farmer himself. So it does not mean the worker will be receiving money.
So you're saying, so by law, the farmer must keep, let's say he loses an arm or a leg. No, that because that then you become incapacitated. And let's say you have a heart attack or a stroke. Was that also? Help me, Louise. What kind of injuries?
If you break a leg and you're out of work for a couple of months.
You break a leg, not lose a leg. So then the farmer is by law required to keep paying that person for 3 months.
Yeah, at least 3 months while being off duty. Yeah?
3 months. After 3 months, he must be back and be ready to work, kind of thing.
No, not necessarily. If he's still receiving treatment and the doctor is still finding him unfit for work, then he should stay at home. So one of two things can happen. The farmer can continue paying the salary after the 3 months, but that is not stipulated by law, but the farmer can voluntarily do it. But that money will also be refunded to the farmer. Alternatively, the worker then can go directly to the Department of Labor after the 3 months and claim the salary directly from the fund, from the Department of Labor. So that's the two options after the 3 months. But with regards to the first 3 months, it is the obligation of the farmer to pay the worker his wages while he or she has been booked off. But the example that you made, if someone loses a leg, that's also a reality, or someone loses an arm or finger. In those instances, then the worker, him or herself, they can qualify also for a specific percentage, because there's a schedule in the Act that states if your finger was amputated at that specific digit, if the arm was amputated maybe at the elbow or at the wrist, the hand, there is a specific percentage that is payable then to the worker who got injured. So in addition to the money that's paid back to the farmer for the wages, the worker in those instances can qualify for some sort of a disability payment, a specific percentage.
Okay, and okay, so a lot of people will talk about this as a injury on duty, or IOD, if I'm correct.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
when does that duty start? Does it start when the farmer picks him up from his house where he lives, or does it
Yeah.
work when he touches the first implement on the farm? When does that commence?
Yeah, so you have to look at the specific case, like the example that you made. So, for instance, they are being picked up in the community. Like, I mean, what happens, especially in the Western Cape as well. So, as soon as the person is being picked up at the pickup point, then that means that person is on duty at that stage. So, irrespective if they've reached the farm, it does not matter. But this is maybe also something I can touch on. In the new regulation, which was signed not that long ago by the president, this is one of the aspects they are looking at. It's not being implemented yet because they still have to decide that. So, what's going to happen? That is also going to change slightly. So, in the current scenario is if the person is being picked up on the transport, on the vehicle, that is when the person is on duty. But with the new regulations, as soon as the person reaches the pickup point, irrespective if they have been picked up, so that person is going to be regarded to be as on duty when they reach the pickup point with the new regulation. So there's going to be a slight difference here.
Okay, well that opens up some gray areas. If I
Yes.
just quickly think, because if again I'm playing devil's advocate here, if the guy's standing on a corner in his community where the truck normally picks them up, and taxi skips a robot and hits him next to the road, is that an injury on duty then?
Yeah, so with the new regulation, that will then be regarded as an injury on duty. So as soon as you reach the pickup point, and then that means they will be on duty. Yeah. But as it stands currently, only when the farmer picks the person up, currently, then they will be regarded as on duty.
Interesting.
That seems like a very strange change to the law because, I mean,
Yeah.
if you're standing waiting for somebody, but they haven't arrived yet, how can those people who are employing you be responsible for something that happens to you before they arrive? It's a bit strange. Sorry to be saying.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one doesn't always know. I mean, what are the kind of facts that they looked at when deciding to change it? But that is how it is going to be currently. It's probably got something to do with the fact that the guy is going to go there uh, to be picked up by the farmer, and I mean, they probably decided, you know what, as soon as you reaches that point, and then you can be regarded as on duty because there can certain things happen to that person.
Mm.
I mean, there are also policies actually provided by the private sector stating, I mean, the same fact that when when that person reaches a point, a pickup point, then there are policies actually covering for those kind of incidents if something is to happen. So they probably try to be a bit more consistent, looking at other policies, what's covered by, say, the private sector, and so I mean that can be some of the thinking as well.
Okay, and
Okay. Yeah.
here's another question. If that is the case, that person is then being seen as being on duty, does that means that from that point onwards, his 8 hours of work starts?
In terms of this legislation, the COIDA, the Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases, then we can regard it as being on duty. In whatever happens from the time the person has been picked up, like for instance, if they're getting involved in a car accident, then that will also be covered while they were traveling to the farm. And not only traveling to the farm, but also when they are going to be dropped off after they finish their normal duty. Yeah. So they will then be regarded.
But sorry, I might have not explained my question. So let's say his contract stipulates that he's got to work for 8 hours, from 8 till 5 with 1 hour lunch. I'm just hypothetically here. If he gets picked up at, let's say, 7 o'clock, does that mean his 8 hours finishes at 4, or does he only go onto the clock when he physically clocks in at the location?
You see, what we have to be careful is because there's certain different labor legislation speaking, like the basic conditions of employment. So that will make it clear, for instance, when he clocks in, now he's on duty. But with the COID Act, it will approach it differently now. So with regards to maybe being covered for a work accident, it is when it's been picked up. But when it comes to his payment, he will only get the normal salary, or it is only been calculated from the time maybe when he's clocked in. But so we just have to look at certain variations when we speak about certain incidents in this manner. So one piece of legislation will indicate it as this, but a different piece of legislation with regards to an accident will say, you know what, you don't have to be on the premises to be covered, but while you're coming to the premises, in this instance where the farmer picks you up, now you are being covered. So we just have to make that kind of differentiation.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
Interesting.
that makes sense. And again, I'm asking this because I don't know.
No.
I'm not trying to get you into a corner to say something you shouldn't. I'm literally trying to think what, because you know how people are. It's like exactly
No,
like
that
you
is,
overhear stuff, and then somebody might say, "Yeah, but this act says when I'm there at the spot where they must pick me up, so that means at 4 o'clock I must knock off."
yeah,
And
no,
it's
not
again,
necessarily.
they might just misunderstand it, or they did not know the right way it's
Exactly.
supposed to go.
No, exactly. And that is
So,
why I want to
Stephan,
emphasize it.
sorry,
Yes.
you sent us a couple of pointers, and one of them is you say the agricultural industry is divided into subcategories according to the
Yeah.
Compensation of Occupation Injuries and Diseases Act. So the different categories, can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I think we touched briefly on some of it. Like, for instance, if you're a livestock farmer, for instance, you will indicate when you do your application to be registered at the fund, you have to indicate what kind of farming activity or what kind of farming you have. Like, for instance, your livestock. Uh, and then also, with every subclass, with every category, that is associated with a specific rate that each farmer is going to pay. For instance, if you look at the livestock farmer, they are, well, all of these rates have been reviewed a couple of years ago, and at the end of 2025, so it's been phased in over a 5-year period. So in 2025, for instance, a livestock farmer, to cover his workers, he's going to pay R2.65 for every R100 in salary, in wages that he's paying to his workers. So that's the rate that he's going to pay to the compensation fund. But then you also get your like, for instance, if it's only someone who's farming with tea or sugar, so that is mostly within Gauteng or KZN. So they are only going to be assessed at at 56 cents per R100 in wages. So you can see there's a huge difference between the different activities. But what if someone is just planting crops? So they will be paying the exact same rate as a livestock farmer, which is R2.65 per R100. But now you have to be careful. But what if it's a combination of the two? He's planting crops, but he's also farming with livestock. Now it's a combination. So how are you going to assess that person? So they are going to be assessed at R1.65 per every R100 in wages that they're paying out. So this is where farmers have to be so careful. For instance, what if you just maybe start off farming only with livestock, but within a couple of years, you're changing your farming activities where you're also starting to plant crops now. Now at that stage, you can actually apply to the compensation fund to be reassessed, and then there can be huge savings. If it's approved, you just have to provide the necessary proof that you're no longer only a livestock farmer, but you're a mixed farmer now. So then you can apply to be reassessed. But another thing which I've also picked up recently, I was approached by a farmer I think in Free State, to register a claim for him. So on the employees report, you indicate what does the business do. So he indicated the agriculture farming, but so we registered it. But then what I've seen, he's actually assessed as a transport company. So what he does, whenever he's got livestock, he has to take it somewhere to be sold, or the crops must go somewhere to be processed. But in transporting it, that is not his primary income. His primary income is from farming. He's a farmer, so that is his primary income. So I identified that he was actually assessed incorrectly as a transport company. So I spoke to him about it, and then we actually started with a process to apply for him to be reassessed, which was approved because he's a farmer, and so he's paying actually R1 cheaper, R1 less for every R100 in wages that he's paying out, and he never knew that. So that is also where farmers must be very careful to see how are they being assessed by the compensation fund to make sure they are on the right category. And it does not only happen with farmers, but also happen with companies within the private sector where they're being assessed incorrectly, and then they're paying huge fees to the fund, which is not how it's supposed to happen. But it always happens, or most of the time it happens, of how they were registered right in the beginning, and then they just accepted it as correct over all these years. Just a correction, I think I've said 56 cents, but the sugarcane farmers, they're actually paying 65 cents per R100 in wages annually.
Yeah, it's just a spelling mistake.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
that
I
is-
didn't know that. I used to farm. I didn't know that there was a difference in the payment that you have to buy the different type of farming you do. So that's also
Yeah.
very interesting.
Okay, so
And then
again, being devil's advocate here, and we know how some of the farmers are. That let's say he's got a single. Let's say he's got crops, but he doesn't have livestock. But for crops, you're paying, and again, I'm just making up a number. Let's pay R2 per R100 for crops, and when it's a mixed, it's going to be R1.50, for instance. Can he now just get like 2 Hans lammetjies that's there on the yard for his kids to play with, and then claim himself to be a mixed farming operation?
No, unfortunately, it's not going to be that easy, because they say the combination between the two, the relation between the two should be about 50%, but not much higher than 60-40. And that is now depending on the time the workers spend on each of these activities. So that is what you're going to have to prove if you want to be assessed now as a mixed farmer. So there's quite a bit of documents which you have to provide. You have to provide photos of your farming activity. So, but you know what, the fund can also send out an inspector to come and have a look to say, you know what, okay, you say this is what you do, so we just want to come and check if it's what you are doing.
I just loaded them. They've just left on the truck to the slaughterhouse. You just missed them.
They can come back tomorrow, I suppose.
Another question, another pointer that you have here is you say, okay, so the Compensation of Occupational Injuries and Diseases Act is the main piece of legislation that governs the field you work in. But you say, what other pieces of legislation also speak about the administration of work accidents?
Well, this legislation, the COIDA Act, that speaks normally about when something happened already, like it's reactive. So once an accident happened. But now, then there's also the Occupational Health and Safety Act, not directly speaking about the administration of work accidents, but that is trying to prevent accidents from happening. So farmers must be aware of what is expected of them to kind of ensure the safety, the health and safety, but not only of the workers, but also of visitors who's visiting farms. So they need to have things in place to prevent these accidents, and there's quite a number of regulations. There's about 22 regulations in the OS Act, the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and I have to say most of those regulations are applicable on the agricultural industry because they deal with a lot of different aspects, like with chemicals, machinery, asbestos. So there's quite a lot of things which they have to be aware of in preventing accidents. So there's quite a number of things which they have to look out for to see what's applicable on them. But in short, it's basically to prevent accidents, which you have to look at. And then when something happened, then we look at the COIDA Act, the Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases Act, on how to deal with that accident.
Okay, so the Health and Safety Act, that's the one where you would actually probably, farmers would be training people to be careful of dangerous things, and
Yeah,
having
correct. And
documentation and posters and that kind of thing up to guide people on being careful so that they don't end up with a work injury.
yeah, that's what's trying to do. So what we actually do is, whenever we receive the farmer, who need assistance, and they agreed, okay, that we are going to walk a distance in future in terms of how we can further assist them, then we actually provide them with some of these posters. What the law says, it has to be like the employment equity, basic conditions of employment, and also the occupational health and safety. Those are the kind of posters which they have to have in their offices, where someone can read through it. Yeah.
So what have been if you can give us some examples of how your assistance and your help to people struggling with this problem have helped them solve or get down the road or deal with issues. Have you got some on a practical level? What have you done and how has it gone?
Yeah, the example which I've made earlier, this farmer did not know that he was assessed incorrectly by the fund. And because of the knowledge that I've gained over the years, I could identify that somewhere something is not right. And so he is going to save quite a lot of money in years to come. So because he's going to be assessed at a lower rate, so if we're going to look at in the next couple of years, he's not going to pay, for instance, more than 3 rand per 100 rand in wages that he's going to pay out. He's going to pay from 2025. He's only going to pay 165. So those are the things which we can identify where farmers, but not only farmers, but any company out there can save money when it is the compensation fund. And also on other practicalities, for instance, if a farmer, one of his workers got injured or had sustained serious accidents, we will register those claims. But what we also do is we can calculate exactly how much money is payable back to him based on the guy's wages, how much it was, and for how long he was booked off. Then we also claim that money back from the fund. It is paid directly to the farmer, because to be honest with you, there's many farmers who just gave up in claiming back that money because the amount of time that they have to spend in terms of administration, man hours in trying to get that money. So we take that out of their hands so that they don't have to spend that much time in getting that money. And we get quite a lot of money back for companies. But not only that, many farmers did not even know. Remember, in smaller towns, there's maybe only a GP, but there is not a specialized services where if someone sustained a serious accident, now they have to drive quite far sometimes to get the worker to a specialist somewhere else. So that kilometers the farmer is driving to get that worker there, they didn't know that they can claim that kilometers. So we point that out, and then we also claim that money back on their behalf, and then the money is paid directly to them. So we've made quite a lot of money. We're talking about a couple of millions over the last many years. And not only while doing this in my private capacity, but also while I was employed at a university to get that money back. So we're speaking about quite a lot of money. And there's more than enough money at the fund. For instance, if you look at the last time they published their financials, they made 9.5 billion rand in 2022. So there's quite enough money for them to pay all of these benefits to whoever should qualify for it. But unfortunately, the administration from their side, from the government side, is a bit of a challenge. So often people are not getting paid who's supposed to get paid this money.
Sure.
Okay. So that's
another question. So so you're talking about these monies being paid. That is now money towards the doctor, not just the compensation for the 3 months that you have to pay for the worker. That's also the doctor's bills.
That's correct.
So let's say the guy's he's busy spitting in the field, and he puts the shovel through his shoe and into his foot. Where do you take him? Do you take him to the government hospital? Do you phone an ambulance? Do you take him to the Mediclinic or private hospital? Because obviously there's a big difference in money between private hospital and a government hospital. So what advice have you got on that?
Yeah, you see, actually, the biggest amount of money which are being paid by the fund is actually towards medical expenses. So they pay more towards doctors, hospitals than they would pay to an employee or to a farmer. So my suggestion is, you know what, farmers are paying a lot of money. Many of the cases are being accepted if it's work related. So that this is one way that the worker, the farmer, can qualify for private health care, because the fund will pay the hospital rates as what the medical aid will pay. So my suggestion is, if a private hospital is accessible, get him to the hospital as soon as possible. It is the responsibility of the employer, the farmer, to get the guy to healthcare. Either they can phone an ambulance to come and pick him up, depending if it's a serious emergency, or if the farmer can take the guy to a hospital, they can do it. So, but my suggestion is get him to a private hospital as soon as possible. And then, well, unfortunately, in certain towns, they're not going to get a private hospital, but get him to a doctor or to a government hospital. There are a couple of good government hospitals. I mean, especially in the Western Cape, I mean, in my experience. So there are a couple of guys who are just doing their work. But my suggestion is get him to private healthcare, and then but just ensure that the paperwork is up to date, so that there shouldn't be any kind of issues, comebacks from the hospital side as well.
Okay, so here's another question. And I think a lot of these questions come up because I've got small kids, and if they go to the doctor, these are the first kind of questions that you normally ask yourself. Okay, right. So now you take your worker to the Mediclinic, go into the ER, they check him out and says, okay, right, now you need to see so-and-so specialist. But so-and-so specialist is running on private rates, not at medical aid rates. So instead of him charging 1,000 Rand for something, he's charging 3,000 Rand for that. Will the compensation fund pay that exorbitant thing? Because us people who've got medical aids, we've got to have a gap cover also to cover that instance if that arises. How does something like that work in a case like this?
You know what? In the most important thing that should happen in that cases is that the farmer should brought it under the attention of the doctor or the specialist that is actually a work-related accident and is not privately. It didn't happen privately. And in my experience, they will actually the specialist will charge the medical aid rates for the treatment that they will provide to that worker. But it's very important that the farmers should inform them it is an accident, and normally how they inform is by giving them a copy of the employee's report stating, okay, this is what happened, and then in those instances, most instances, they will charge medical aid rates, those specialists.
Okay, yeah, because it's just because everybody's had these experiences with doctors where you think that everything is sorted by the medical aid, and then 3-4 months down the line you get a bill for. Yeah, so it's something that we need to know, and I presume that the farmer himself has got the right also to, let's say that guy says, well, then I'm not going to step down to the medical aid rate. Then he's got the right to say, well, then we want a different doctor.
Yeah, no, of course.
Because in the end, somebody's going to have to pick up the bill.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. So, but normally, remember, you have a free choice to go and see any doctor. But if you, for instance, being referred by a general a doctor, normally your GP, then they will refer you to a specific doctor. Then you have to go to that specific doctor whom you are being referred to for the treatment. But I suppose that there are instances where the doctor will state, you know what, they will charge whatever rates they want to charge. But as I say, in my experience, the only thing the farmer has to do is provide them with details of the accident And then in most of those cases, the doctor will charge medical aid rates, because if they operate in a specific, say, hospital group, then that's much easier to control, because those doctors will beforehand decide, what they will charge. So if you go to a medical clinic, to a hospital group, they will get all the different specialists there operating under that umbrella, and then there will normally be an agreement or some sort what they've agreed that it will be your normal medical aid rates for if it comes to a work accident.
Okay, and then I've got another question. Sorry, Louise, I see you've got something. Okay, so to get back to the transport thing, so now you pick up your workers, everything is good, everything's fine, and there's an accident. It doesn't matter what happens. There's an accident that happens. Right, so now you're claiming from the injury on duty fund. Do you also claim from the road accident fund?
That is currently what is happening. So what's going to happen when the doctor closes his case with regards to treatment to the employee? The doctor will state now if he suffered perhaps any kind of permanent disability as a result of that accident, and if there's a payment by the fund, so that will now be documented. And then when the farmer or the farm worker, he's going to put in a claim with the road accident fund. So what the road accident fund will do is go to the compensation fund and get confirmation of all the expenses which they have paid. In whatever payments the road accident fund is going to make, they will deduct those payments first before they will issue their award to the person who's going to qualify for that payment from the third party.
Okay.
And this doesn't happen in 2 days. This doesn't happen in 2 days. This can probably take years.
That's going to be taking years, because remember also that if it's a serious accident, that guy is going to need treatment for as long as the doctor feels he's going to need treatment for. But also, what in terms of legislation is the COIDA Act, all cases closes automatically after a 2-year period, irrespective if you're still receiving treatment. But at that stage, if the doctor is still contemplating further treatment, then they can always apply for the case to be reopened by the fund to enable the fund to pay for any further medical expenses or compensation after the 2-year period, especially in serious accidents. So that can be done. But then the compensation, the permanent disability, can only be paid to the worker as soon as the doctor decides that case is being closed now, and this is what's going to be paid by the compensation fund. Only at that stage will the fund pay anything to the worker, not while he's still receiving treatment for permanent disability.
Okay,
and actually, in certain cases, if I can also just mention, in certain cases, actually, they still have to wait a bit longer, because if it's an accident and the person lost certain movement within a joint, within the wrist joint or the fingers, they actually, say for instance, the doctor closes the case today, then they actually still have to wait another 6 months to get a new report at that stage, because they need to make sure that that loss of movement of that specific joint is not going to improve in that time, because the percentage will be based on the loss of movement. So they still then, in those instances, have to wait a bit longer, even though the case has been closed by the doctor.
Okay. I see on your list of information, you say on the 17th of April 2023, the President of South Africa signed the new Compensation of Occupational Injuries and Diseases Amendment Act. What is the impact of these amendments? What will the impact of these amendments be on the agricultural industry? That's obviously quite an important one for us to cover.
Yeah, no, extremely important. And specific, there's quite a number of aspects which is going to be touched on. But the most important for farmers to know is with regards to the penalties, the administrative penalties, which will be issued as soon as it is going to be introduced. So when we spoke about the registration of farmers with a fund. So normally what happens is, as soon as you are registered, then you have to submit your return of earnings for the fund to calculate how much is payable by the farmer. So that happens on an annual basis. Now, normally, that earnings to be declared must be done in March, normally in March every year. but they have a tendency maybe to postpone that date as well, to give farmers maybe or companies a bit more time, because it's close to their financial year end, so they just to give them a bit more time to prepare the paperwork to declare it. But what if you miss the deadline to submit that earnings? Now you're going to be penalized. So currently how it works, the penalties, if you miss the deadline, even by 1 day, by an hour, because you have to do it electronically. So what's going to happen? A penalty will be issued for the late submission of that earnings, to declare that earnings. So the penalty will be based on how much you declared, and then the account will be issued. So then it will be 10% on, say, the 2022 account being issued. So if that account comes to 50,000, which you have to pay for that specific year, now it's 10% of that 50,000, which is 5,000. But now
That's quite a
for
bit.
that is not the last of it. If this new regulation is going to be introduced, that 50,000 account must take how it's calculated is based on the earnings which the farmer declared. So, for instance, that earnings which was declared was, say, 400,000 to get to the 50,000. Now the penalty is not going to be 10% on the 50,000 rand of the account which was issued, but is going to be 10% on the earnings which were declared by the farmer, which says, an example of 400,000. Now 10% of that 400,000 is going to be 40,000. So this is going to have extreme consequences for someone who is submitting the annual returnings late. So they have to be aware of this fact. But as I just have to emphasize, this is what they've agreed to, but it is not law yet. So that still has to be decided. But there can hopefully still be some changes with regards to that.
Sure.
So
Okay,
it's an
so
extreme.
that
So his account will go from 50 to 90.
Yeah, so and remember, there's only the penalty, but I mean that doesn't include the account payable, so that also has to be added with the account. But not only that, now the account is issued, and once the account is issued, now you're only going to have 30 days to make a payment to the fund with regards to that account. But you have the option to make a payment arrangement as well. But if you don't apply to pay the account off, or you don't pay it within the 30 days, then you're going to suffer an additional 10% penalty off of the account if you don't pay it or make a payment arrangement within the 30 days.
Also,
So
also of that 400,000.
that's correct. Yeah, what they're looking
So
to change.
it will go from 50 to 90 to 130.
So there's going to be quite a lot of money. So in terms of the account of the responsibilities of the farm or any company out there, so that is what they have to be aware of with the two major changes with regards to the account. But then also there's going to be other changes, and also the most significant one is with regard to the reporting of the accident within 7 days. Currently, the law states it must be within 7 days after you received information about it. But there's not really clear administrative penalties being issued. But now what the law is also stating now, if you don't report it within 7 days, now the penalty, as we just spoken about, is going to be the same fate that the farmer is going to suffer if an accident is not reported within 7 days. You can understand that they're looking at penalties, because remember but I'm not necessarily agreeing with the amount that they're going to be issued, because remember that accident has to happen has to be reported as soon as possible, because it's important for the doctors to know, what, it is reported, so that the doctors can also claim, and so that the person also can receive the necessary treatment, because doctors tend maybe to not treat someone if they don't have proof that the accident was registered, because they've also stand to lose a lot of money if for some reason that accident is never been registered. And unfortunately, there are cases where it takes sometimes a company maybe weeks, months, even years sometimes to register an accident, which is perhaps not fair to the employee as well, because they have to receive treatment as soon as possible.
Wow.
Jesus,
Well,
it's
it
actually
certainly is going to make people. It certainly is going to make people get with the act. I mean, I know for a fact as farmers, as soon as you're dealing with a workman's compensation thing, everybody rolls their eyes and it's like, oh, it's a whole big administrative thing. Oh, do I have to do this? Oh, where do we start? And it's going to take forever and it's going to cost and all the rest. But as you say, when you walk through the door and you want medical treatment, the doctor must know for sure that that has been registered and it is going to happen, so that eventually one day the money might come back from the fund, will come back from the fund. And I can understand that it's important, but I also think, again, this is one of those things whereby if farmers are not aware of this, this is really going to come and bite them in the from behind.
In the arse.
Absolutely. It's going to make, it's going to catch them off guard.
Yeah, and something new which they introduced with regards to the administration of work accidents, they've introduced this new online system, the compensation fund, where you have to register a profile. Is basically the same principle as e-filing. So with e-filing, with submitting your declaration with SARS, you can either go to the office and submit all your documents, or you can create an online platform where you can do it in no time. You'll see what's happening. So the same with the fund. They've introduced this new online system called CompEasy, but you have to register a profile first. You can't access the system without registering a profile. So as soon as they've done that, then it's quite easy to register a claim online, a work accident. But unfortunately, one of the drawbacks is that foreign workers, those cases cannot be registered online, because this system is linked with Home Affairs. So as soon as you put in the ID number of the employee, the injured person, then it grabs the information from Home Affairs and then it populates it. But with a passport, there's not a system here, because that is an international passport. So we're not linked locally, like Home Affairs not linked with a foreign country where they can verify their passport. So there's still an internal process that needs to happen. If it's someone with a passport or a work permit, the Department of Labor must verify that, and only thereafter will a case number be created to report those cases. So that's the slight drawback, which is understandable, yeah. But with regards to the CompEasy online system, I would suggest to every farmer out there or to every company to immediately start registering that profile. Don't wait until there's an accident, because I think that is sometimes a tendency. People wait until it's an accident and maybe now they must rather be proactive, getting it registered, and then when something happens, you can go immediately online, whatever time of the day, register it and get that number as soon as possible to the doctor. And I think it will just make it easier for everyone involved, that it can be dealt with as soon as possible.
Sure.
Very, very interesting. And Stephen, everything that you've said for the last almost hour that we've been speaking, it just all points to the fact that it's got more complicated. Some of it's got more complicated, but as you're saying, if you can do it online, it's actually easier. But do people know about it? Do people know about all these things? And I think that you are working in a field which is full of loopholes and misinformation, and where people really don't know how to do with this. They are not skilled in dealing with it. They don't know how to. They're inexperienced. So I think you've definitely found a field that's very important and that needs people like you. So if people need your services, how do they get hold of you?
Well, I do have a website, and it's important to know it is in Afrikaans, because most of the clientele is Afrikaans. Yes. So, I mean, we were looking into also to translate into English, but the website is workaccident.co.za, and they can send a message from there, or they can contact me via email or WhatsApp, and the email address is support@workaccident.co.za, and then the phone number, they can either phone me or WhatsApp me. It's 064 360 2638.
Just give me a second. Give me the website again.
Workaccident.co.za. Very straightforward and easy to remember.
Okay, and then
the email is
telephone number
064 360 2638.
Okay, I'll just put the website and the telephone number, and you'll see. Let me just see if it shows. There we go. Did I spell it right?
Yeah, work accident at COIDA in cell number 064. That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
And then if they want to send an email, they just put support at work accident. Very easy to remember, yeah.
Yeah, well, we can keep that on there for a second. So I think there's a lot that we can still talk about with this. The temporary workers, like you said, people for international workers from Zimbabwe, Lesotho. There's a whole lot of stuff around that probably as well, I presume.
Yeah,
So
no, exactly.
another question I've got before we start wrapping this up is, so we've only spoken about the workers being registered with this act. What about the actual farmers? Should
Yeah.
a farmer or grower, a business owner, for instance, like yourself or Louise and I, be registered for this, for in case something happens?
You see,
To act in other words.
within the industry, as I mentioned earlier, farmers are normally registered as a different entity. For instance, if he's a sole trader, then that means that he is the business. So then, unfortunately, in terms of the act, okay, he does not qualify, so he does not need to provide his earnings to be registered. So only his employees, and remember, he does not register the employees as individuals like in the case of UIF, unemployment insurance. He just register them with the number of workers that he has, and then how much money he's paying them annually. So that is how we register the workers. When it comes to a private company which is registered with the CIPC, now those directors who's earning salaries from the farming business, so they are regarded as a worker, as an employee in terms of this act. So their salaries must be also declared with the fund, which means they are regarded as a worker. So they must be registered as well. Those wages must be included when it is declared annually. So that's the difference between the sole trader and if it's a private company.
See,
director.
that's a very important point there, I think, is because look, I don't know what the growers or the owners of these companies earn. It could be a lot of money. So
Yeah.
that will affect your the amount that you've got to pay towards the compensation fund. It's not just your workforce, which might be one person, it might be 100, it might be 1,000 people. So it's very interesting. But
Yeah,
then
but
are they automatically covered in this? So let's say I go pick up my worker and I drive to the orchard and a tractor hits me. Can I then also go to the hospital and go claim for my injuries through this?
That's correct. Yeah, if you're now regarded as a worker, as an employee, like in the case where you're a director, a working director is receiving a salary, now you have the same benefits. But I also just have to add, the fund annually indicate a capped amount of salary that must be declared. So that doesn't mean if I'm earning, say, 800,000 per annum, I have to declare 800,000. If the fund says, you know what, this is currently it is 583,000, which is the cap salary, then you only have to declare your earnings up to that amount, not more than that, because then you're going to make a mistake. And unfortunately, this is actually what I see often happens. And I actually pointed out this to a company a couple of years ago in the private sector, where they declared the full payroll of the employees, not knowing that there's a cap salary, and they paid a huge amount of money the 1 year. And when I pointed it out to them, for instance, the 1 year when they declared it themselves, they paid about 700,000 rand to the fund in terms of to be assessed now. But the following year, when I pointed out, actually, you know what, you made a mistake the previous year, then they only paid 254,000. You can see it's a huge difference. So they have to be aware of that cap salary, which you have to declare it to.
You can't get that money back. If it's
You
paid,
can't
it's paid.
get it back. If you become aware within 60 days there's a mistake, then you can apply to the fund within 60 days after the account has been issued to say, okay, doesn't matter whose mistake it was, but you can prove it was a mistake, and then you have to provide them with financials, your payroll report, the earnings you declared to SARS. Then you can actually apply for that to be rectified. Unfortunately, it's a bit of a headache, but it can be done, and then at least you can save some money. You can rectify, but only if it's within 60 days.
Just make sure that somebody's got a doctor friend and somebody's got to take one for a team and get a hammer on the toe or something.
Serious accidents, unfortunately, it's a bit too serious for my liking.
But Stephen, it's been incredibly interesting speaking to you. And if now I really know that there is a gaping chasm of information that a lot of growers don't know about. And information, all the stuff that you mentioned now, extremely interesting. And I think there's a lot of work out there for your business.
Okay,
Yes.
I know we believe so, and we just see how we can help you.
And good luck with that.
Okay, now
Yeah.
thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, before we go,
Yes.
and we've got a closing tradition. The previous guy asks a question for the next guy, and you will leave us a question after we stop the recording for the next person we interview. So, question that was asked to us: what is something new that you have recently learned? And this can be anything.
About anything, not necessarily on the topic.
Sure, which I've learned. Well, there's quite a lot. I mean, if I when I attend some of these events, and just to hear what farmers have to deal with on a daily basis, especially with droughts, for instance, we can be so deflated because a lot of what they do depends on the rainfall that they get. And then so that is normally what I want to get from them is, how do you deal with those kind of matters? I mean, it's your livelihood. You're not getting rain, so it depends on how much money you make and to provide you for family. So I just think it's not probably something which I've learned, but just to see the tenacity of some farmers to get through that, irrespective of the circumstances, what they're dealing with on a daily basis. I think that is probably something which I've learned. I mean, speaking to them and sitting with them, what I've learned sometimes when I go and attend some of these events. Yeah.
Wow, very cool.
Well, it's good to hear that because so often people don't realize the kind of risks that farmers are exposed to and the kind of things that they have to live through. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's very important.
Oh, great.
Well,
is there
thank you so
anything
much,
else?
Stephen.
Anything else you wanted to add as a wrap up?
Yeah, and maybe just with regards to work accidents, I remember that farmer who, in that fortunate situation, is losing his life. Remember, his family can now also qualify for benefits with regards to this, because if he's the breadwinner, he was married, got children, can qualify. And unfortunately, also some of the mistakes sometimes which farmers are making. Not the mistake, okay, they do provide money for the funeral, but my suggestion will always be to rather pay the funeral cost directly to the funeral parlor, because that is when they can receive that money back from the fund as well. Rather, don't give it to the family, pay directly to the funeral parlor, because that is what I've picked up quite a bit, and then they can't qualify for those payments. And I mean, every cent that they actually give out, they can get it back in most instances, yeah. But with regards to the act, I think it's well placed to make a significant difference, especially with farm workers who are so vulnerable. They can receive world-class treatment at private hospitals. But unfortunately, as you know, sometimes with government, it is a bit challenging. But from the farmer side, he just has to make sure he's doing what's expected of him. But believe me, most of them are doing it. But then they just have to be aware what they can qualify for, and they just have to push for that those benefits that they qualify for.
Sure.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very, very much for your time. Sorry it's taken months for us to get to you, but we hung in there, and
the wait has been worth it.
No, great. Yeah.
Fascinating. Thank you so much.
Okay, now thank you very much for this opportunity.
Oh, right, I'm going to click the end recording, so just hang on a second.
Don't go yet.
Thank you.